Hi, my name is Franca Maria Ando, and this is my new podcast called The Three Lemons. The Three Lemons is about creatives who take things that are normally plain and boring and make them into exciting, beautiful things that people can enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Three Lemons podcast. A podcast that has conversations with creatives, people doing interesting things with their lives. And today I have architect David Kojo Derban, who's going to be talking to me about his life as an architect and his passion for houses and heritage. You're very welcome, David.
Thank you.
What do you prefer to be called, David or Kojo?
Kojo.
Kojo is fine. We can do Kojo. That's not a problem. Yes. Okay, so usually I tend to ask my guests about their childhood because I always feel like there are little clues in one's childhood that helps us understand why we are where we are as adults. So tell me a bit about, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up at the Straight Back Road.
Okay.
It was a block of flats.
Okay.
So there were many people in there, and not just my own flat, but there were so many people to relate to, many children growing up, many grown-ups to relate to, and it was fun. I also had a very inquiring mind, so basically I related to them a little, deeper than normal children would, because I was always asking questions. If I got into somebody's kitchen, I would ask, what are you cooking? How are you cooking it? Things like that, So, well, they liked me a lot. And I was always all over the place, not living in my own flat, always going upstairs and downstairs, bugging into people's flats and, things like that. So I was always around, outside, inside, everywhere.
So it was like a community, you would say.
It was a community, exactly.
When you talked about asking a lot of questions, I kind of am reminded of how, when you travel, you're on the train, you see that the kids ask a lot of questions. The parents take their time to answer. Whereas here, it's like, oh, you talk too much, go find something to do. We don't seem to have that kind of patience with our children to answer because children ask some silly questions, or what we think are silly questions. What are some of the questions that you would be asking, apart from what are you cooking?
No, I mean, for example, my teachers.
Okay.
I'll be the kind of child that was noticed that the teacher was even feeling well. You see, so if she turned up in class, and we should be reminded that these teachers were just 22 years old at the time.
That's true.
And I attended Rechurch. You see, these were young teachers. Of course, we saw them as grown. But if she wasn't feeling well, I'd be able to tell and ask her between classes that, what's wrong with you? And usually she would say, oh, of course, Ghanaians will say nothing. Thank you, But I knew, and I've expected her to continue the conversation and say, oh, I have a headache. And then my inquiring mind would go further and further. So because of that, I couldn't concentrate very well. While she was teaching me, I was thinking about her headache. So if she asked me a question, I always, you could ask me 2 + 2 and I couldn't answer because my mind was on how well she wasn't feeling. The same thing extended to members of my class, always, I was thinking about something else about them other than, if they turned up in a very new car, I was thinking, oh, they must be rich, and so my inquiring mind would go into, oh, what type of house do they live in? Where do they live? So I would ask my mother, say, where's Airport Residential Area? Who lives there? Which type of people live there? And they're like, why are you asking these questions? But I'll still be asking. I keep on asking until I get some answers. All these were just feeding my mind. All these were feeding my mind.
And the two of you have a brother.
Yes.
And you're the older.
Yes.
So what was your relationship like with him?
Oh, we are very, very close. We've always been close since we were kids. And of course, William has been my greatest supporter. I call him Will. So in much of my writings, he's a character in there who's, of course, he was the goodie. and I was a baddie. You know, they called him Abel, they called me Cain. So, so they always put us against each other. Like he's 3 years younger than me. So when he was 2, I was 5. You know, and you know, one day he got lost. You know, he was following us around somewhere, and he got lost. You know, and then I was raving, I was crying, and they kept saying, into up and down, some them no brunan. Things like that, you know. We've always had a great relationship. You know, always great relationship.
So you eventually went from Richards. Where did you go to secondary school?
I went to St. Peter's Secondary School.
Okay.
Yes, it was a strict Catholic school.
Okay.
You know, male.
Who chose the school? You or your mom?
My mother must have chosen this.
So you didn't she didn't ask you where you'd want to go? Or?
Well, at that time, I mean, she was Catholic, and you know, Catholic was the way to go. Okay. And you know, St. Peter's was a great science school, and my father wanted me to be a doctor. Okay. You see, he said, look, you are sympathetic, you can empathize, you've got feelings for people, so you should be a doctor. But the truth was that the biology was killing me, the chemistry was actually killing me. I couldn't do it. Now, I always wanted to be an architect. Well, that's what my mother told me, that at 9, I said I wanted to be an architect. So he took me to see Kenneth Scott.
You're kidding.
Yes, he took me to see Kenneth Scott.
The great Kenneth Scott.
Yes, you know, and I remember sitting with him at 9, but I just don't remember anything he said. Wow. I don't remember, but I remember going there to Scott House very often, and sitting under that big green tree. You know, I loved houses. I just loved places, new places. And every Saturday I ask, can we go to Scott House? I just wanted to be there. Wow. You know, I just wanted to be there in people's houses and look at new things. You know, we visited one Mr. Hincross, you know, and he was a diplomat. And his study had different things, different books, antiques and everything. And I told my mother that I didn't want to go back.
Why?
You know, because I just love the antiques. And even at that age, at 10, you know, that's when, you know, throwing my mind back, I realized that all the things that I love now, I loved then. It was always there.
That's amazing.
It was always there, you know. If we look for these clues, you will find them in our past.
That's amazing. So when you went to St. Peter's, you went in wanting to please your dad to an extent and do science and be a doctor.
Do science. Basically, that was the route to be a doctor. But St. Peter's is a very strict school. Okay. They are great with sports and science and things like that, but not too great with the arts. You know, even though they did art, but you know, at 7, I was a pianist at 7. I was playing concerts at 7. I was taught by Mrs. Natty. Mrs. Natty was at Ringway. She was a Jamaican piano teacher. She taught George Francois. See, so I met them when we played concert at British Council. See, and I wanted to play piano simply because I was at Christ the King. I looked at the person playing the organ and I thought, I want to be there, you know, and press whatever he is pressing. So my mother took me to, you know, she was the greatest piano teacher, you know, and she liked me very much. She taught me how to play concerts. But when I went to St. Peter's, there was a school band. So then I became the keyboardist of the school band for all my years. What's it called?
They all have these names.
I don't quite even remember the name, but I was the school keyboardist, of course, and the church organist for a very long time until I left. You know. Then,
so, whilst you were in St. Peter's, was there a shift in terms of your interests academically, like from the science?
What I realized was that I was suffering with the science. There was no, you know, and I think that was also good because then it was convincing my father that maybe this guy is not for me. So after the O levels, which was a little shaky, I wanted some place to express all these stories that I had gathered in me. Because for me, anybody I meet, every place I go, formed a story in my head. I made up my own impressions of people in my head. See, so I decided to go to NAFTI.
Wow.
I said, look, I'll go to NAFTI. If, I don't get into tech to do, I'll just go to NAFTI. And the day they were about to consider me for NAFTI, I got a letter from tech that, I've gotten architecture, so I should go and do it. So
wow.
I jumped to go and do architecture instead. What I'd always wanted to be. In fact, apart from being a filmmaker, there was nothing else I could be. Just an architect. That's what I wanted to be. And I got a chance to do it.
So, that's amazing. And how did you find the course? Like, was it what you expected it to be? Was it challenging? Was it exciting? What was it like for you?
Well, it was challenging,
Okay.
definitely. One, I was heavily asthmatic. That was a problem, over the strenuous walking from your halls to that was a little stressful. But apart from that, I really loved the course, you see, and I always put a lot of ideas into my work. And I mean, definitely, I had some of the lecturers, loved me for it. Professor Wellington,
I know him.
Yes, him. Stone stories. I mean, he's always been my father in architecture.
Yes.
And he was always behind me, supporting me and everything. But I realized somewhere that, I was a trained classical pianist. Everything that we learned at home was slightly Eurocentric. But one evening there was we had a show. It's an annual show called Explo also. They have a drama, and that drama was in an African style. It was about a village. It was called Storm in the Calabash. And it was a village scene. So it wasn't anything fairy tale, like it wasn't Eurocentric, it wasn't like the normal play. This was a village play, And my life changed after that. After that evening, that was it. I refused to wear shirts with ties. I refused to wear anything Eurocentric. I just became very Afrocentric. My piano playing went away. I wanted to learn how to play a xylophone. I, bought calabashes that I would rather drink out of rather than drink in a glass. But
that one performance.
Just one performance. It totally converted me, and I just was Afrocentric. And everybody knows me that way. Everybody knows that. And then I realized that if they asked me to design things, then there was trouble. Because if you asked me to design a bank, which was schoolwork, I became bored. You see, I became bored. So my grades started faltering until we reached the final year where I had the chance to choose my own thesis. And then I chose a museum to be built in Tamale. A museum of ethnography. And it was like the Larabanga Mosque, it was like a mosque, an Arabic mosque, and so on. The whole school was very excited about it. And that's where I made my name with, African architecture, African things and everything, which has been a part of me till today. Yeah, that's it.
So when you finished tech, what did you do?
Yes, when I finished tech, I went to work with one Mr. Hayford. Mr. Hayford.
How did I know that name was going to come up?
Mr. Hayford, was, of course, he was a very classy gentleman. He loved luxury African style. It was just the place for me. And I worked with him for a long time. You see, I was lucky also because one day he decided that he had an empty place for me to stay, because I told him one day I need to get out of home and be on my own. And he gave me a place in Westlands. And I didn't know that place belonged to Alero Olympio. Alero Olympio is a famous female architect, lady architect. She died.
She passed away. Yeah.
And she was also very Afrocentric. Her buildings were natural stone. And I lived in her houses, and I'm very proud of that, because she was like a mentor to me. So then my road was already paved. Unfortunately, she died.
Yes.
And I didn't know she had died. One day she wasn't coming to Ghana. She wasn't coming, and I asked her, said, "Oh, she had passed on." So we had a funeral service here, and I started working for myself. But of course, you don't get too many Afrocentric commissions. You don't get maybe an interior or so. I used to design carvings for a living. Just sculpture. I would draw them out and then have the carvers at Art Center make them, and sell them. Things like that. So sculpture was always a part of me. And I studied, architecture, getting into culture. Music, of course, all the music had now become either jazz or African music. Absolutely. Or African traditional music, and especially Malian music. I had a whole lot of music that was just not Ghanaian. Up till now, I just can't tell which Ghanaian artist I have. Wow. I have probably every other African artist. I have Arabic music. And I had a love for music from all over the world. All over the world. Just apart from Ghanaian music.
Maybe because you're familiar with it, so, you're exploring.
So I have, I started collecting African musical instruments. So I have a huge xylophone, I have a kora, I have attentive, and I have lots of these things, and they're in my office. So.
Tell me a bit about your... Because, I follow you on social media, and I find your writing quite interesting because, even though you're an architect, you write in a way that, like, a layperson can enjoy.
Yes.
And you seem to have a passion for heritage and old buildings. Yes. Tell me a bit about that.
Yes. Cities have a narrative. See, when you drive to Accra, there's a story being told. The buildings all tell stories. You see, if you go through Jamestown, there's an old story there. The castles have their own narrative. You go to Independence Square, there's something about it. You go through Usu, the castles, anywhere. Even new areas like Ringway, Laboni, everywhere as you drive through, there is a narrative, you see. But I realized that these past few years, or maybe even past 15, 20 years, most of the older buildings are just being torn down, especially the government ones. They are all being torn down. So Trade Fair is gone, they are raising the Marine Drive, and even threatening the Art Center, you see. And I feel that if we erase all these, it's like we are trying to read a book by starting from chapter 5. You see, we have apartments or some other. We don't have cultural buildings here. We have only one national museum. We don't have any other museums.
We just recently got done. For years.
Yes. It was closed.
Yes.
Comfortably closed. You see, and that's been opened. It's too small. We need to build a national museum. We need a national art gallery. We need a national art center. We need art centers. We need theaters, smaller theaters. We have a national one, but we need smaller theaters that people can express themselves in. All these have not been done, and we are tearing down the story. So what we'll end up with is a city that has a very sketchy story, you see. And what I'm trying to do is through my writing, is to bring awareness to these, so that people don't just see the lighthouse and think it's a lighthouse. Because sooner or later, as it gets older, people cannot climb up, so they can't relate to it. But it was a very important structure.
Absolutely.
Then. You see, it was an important structure then. People stand up there, they are able to tell the fishermen, if there's a storm, they are able to make signs, So much of my writing is to bring people to the knowledge of the architecture that they see, but rarely know about. They just see it as a structure or something nice, but there's always a story behind it. Always a story behind it. If you see the National Theatre, for example, you might think, oh, this is some boat-shaped building. But it has a very great political history. At that time, China wanted to make an impression in Africa, architecturally, and they did it to architecture. And they chose the country because of their relationship with Kwame Nkrumah, which was very strong in the 60s. It broke up when Kwame Nkrumah was thrown away, and they made up, again. And in Rawlings' time, they decided to build this, you see. But the story is with the architect himself, the Chinese architect, and that's the story nobody knows, you see. But I got the story from China, you see. I had to get this information from Chinese architects, who finally told me that the original design was, modern, just a Eurocentric design, and the Ghanaians said they didn't want it. They had a Ghanaian committee. They said, no, we want an Afrocentric one. We want something that is shaped a bit like a stool, something that you wouldn't see anywhere else in the world. You see. So these Chinese struggled for 2 years to come up with this design. Finally, the Ghana Institute of Architects and the Ghanaians said, okay, I think this one will pass. It's very different from anything else around. We'll take it. And you also know that in that space, Ifa Sutherland's studio was there, you see. But everybody seems to have forgotten it.
Yes.
But to pacify her, they built the one in Legon for her, which is a replica, a very bad replica, you see. But all this history is forgotten. So that's what I do. I research it and bring it and put, it's all academic. But I put it in a way that everybody can read.
I enjoy
in the story form
it.
that
I enjoy
everybody,
it. Are you planning on maybe having a book that will have all this for the next generation as well?
Yes.
Because if we don't know, they certainly won't know.
No, that's true. Well, as for publishing, so I'm gathering up all the stories and then putting them together, and then see what to publish a book. Or to do documentaries of them.
Yes, that would be amazing.
And we have a lot to do. We are so behind that, we need to put ourselves together and do this. Everybody needs to cooperate.
We all need to come together and do this.
People with old houses need to. You won't believe how many buildings are in Accra that are behind walls that nobody can access.
Wow.
There's a Greek temple here. We have a Greek temple here. An Orthodox Greek temple in Ghana that people don't know. It's on top of McCarthy Hill. It's on top of McCarthy Hill. But of course, people drive by. They don't look up. But now, of course, because it's been built around, it's,
Wow.
Yeah, it was owned by a Greek merchant. And he built this chapel for himself, where he used to have masses, Greek Orthodox masses, but he left Ghana and sold it. But it's there, in its purity. You see, that has to be studied. See, I've been there. So I'm looking for what is behind people's walls. What is behind people's walls. Get in there, study it, bring it out, and you will discover that we have a very interesting city. A very interesting city.
I think something you've said that kind of struck me was, you said we're tearing down our stories.
Yeah.
And that's very deep on so many levels.
Yeah.
And I think it applies to how we're even living our lives, like we're not, really documenting, and we seem to be in a hurry to be very European and very Western, forgetting that when we go to these same places, they have maintained their old buildings. It's a beautiful blend of old and new. There's no way you go to Yorkshire and they've torn down the cathedral.
No.
You know what I mean? No. And when you go in there are all these tombstones, stories behind people who contributed. Like, they've kept their history.
They've kept it. It's a big, strong industry. In fact, it's stronger than politics for them. You see, that's why there's Buckingham Palace.
Absolutely.
You see, so
it's their identity.
Yes.
It's who they are.
Yes.
And we pay money to go and see who they are.
But here, we have to develop. On Facebook, you know, and I'm very happy for Facebook. That's where I discovered
it's been
that,
a form of
know,
expression.
yes. And there's a community there where you find people of like interest. And I found out that there are people who are interested in these buildings, but we have no laws that protect them in this country. If a government wants to tear down the Black Star Square, there's no law that says they shouldn't do it. They will say, look, this is a waste of space now. We think in the 21st century we should do something else with it. There's no law.
And it's not like other countries where you'll find a group of people petitioning strongly.
You can't do
and
it.
having a voice that's powerful enough to stop governments from doing these things.
Them from doing this. They shouldn't even think about doing things like this. See, the trade fair is gone. You see, the trade fair is gone further. And that is a part of our history of Nkrumah that we needed to preserve. You know, we needed to grow that narrative. But now we've left the round pavilion standing there.
And everything else is
falling
gone.
to the wind. Sooner or later, they will test it and say,
it's not strong
this
enough.
thing is not strong enough. And then finally, everything will go. And what will be in its place has no reference to the past. And it's the referencing that is the reason why we need to preserve the reference. Without the reference, we will have anybody can build a hotel there, and there will be no reference to the past.
Absolutely.
You see, so when I write about the trade fair, I wrote about it. I bring the story of the trade fair to life. You know, I try and tell them the real story behind the trade fair. That was Cold War. It was the West against the East there. You know, it was all about the overthrow of Nkrumah. In fact, the date they chose for opening the trade fair was supposed to be the day that Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown. It was a celebrating day of the overthrow of Nkrumah. Things like that. You know, so when you bring it, you realize that it was not just a fair
Absolutely.
to, you know, exhibit things, but there was something else going on behind all of it. You know, and I think people enjoy it very, very much.
I know that I do. Yeah. I know that I do. David, I wanted to say a big thank you. It's never enough time to have these conversations on this show. So I'm hoping that we should do this again and talk some more. And I'm hoping that that book will be coming out soon. It will. So that you can leave something for the next generation. Yes. We all have children that we need to leave something solid for them to also hold on to. So thank you so much for being here.